Hi, I'm Gavin, and welcome back to our series on DM tips and tools. So today we're going to be talking about something a bit different. We're going to be talking about tips for good DMing in general. So this is really just some 5 rules of thumb to sort of maybe help you get through your sessions and think about a few things. So let's jump right in. So number one, you don't know everything. You can't know everything as a DM because you have absolutely no idea what your um, party's going to do for a start. So let's just run through 3 things I want to sort of remind you of. One, you don't need to know all the rules. Um, there are a lot of rules as written in D&D. There's the Player's Handbook. There's a lot of other tomes as well as the DMG, and it's quite okay not to know the rules. And you can just talk about that with your players when something comes up. You go, well, how should we do this, or what should happen here? And it becomes a bit more cooperative. Secondly, even if you're running your own type of homebrew or you're looking at a commercially available scenario or world, you don't know everything about the background. And in fact, you probably shouldn't know everything about the background. If you do, you've overplanned it. So you can sort of make that up as you go along, ad lib, look stuff up. It's perfectly fine as long as the enjoyment of the game isn't affected by that. And lastly, player backgrounds. I mean, it's hard if you've got a larger party trying to keep everything in your head and whatever. So be interactive. Ask your players, well, what in your background led to this, or what has happened in your character's life to do that. So again, don't need to know everything. Don't need to be 100% on top of stuff, because all it does is it increases your stress levels and actually prevents you from ad-libbing and having an enjoyable game. So that's number one. Number two, this is really more about covering off any potential issues that could occur. If you're playing with a group that you've played with for a while, it's probably not as important. But ultimately, there are some safety tools that you do need to think about when you're running a game. Sometimes games come up and they might expose things which you think are fine, but might trigger something in a player that had a bad experience. It could be as simple as that they are an arachnophobe, and if you're very visual in your descriptions of a giant spider attacking them, it could trigger them. So it could be something as simple as that, or something more insidious in terms of a personal experience. So 3 things to think about here. If you're playing with a group that you don't know, or a new group, or even your old group, and you just want to formalize things, a session 0 is really good. So set the expectations for what your game's going to be like and what's going to happen, and incorporated in that are the themes. So is it a horror-based theme that might actually trigger something? Is it a gory theme in terms of that might trigger people as well too? The last thing is really the X card. So I print out, we've never actually had to use them, but I print them out anyway, a double-sided card just in one of those card sleeves, which has a pause symbol on one hand and a stop symbol on the other. So up front, I tell the players effectively, if they need to stop, if something's happening that they are uncomfortable with, play the stop card, and we will actually just stop what we're doing at that point in time and move on to a next encounter or something else, with no questions asked. It's a perfectly safe space to play. The other is a pause. Maybe you just need to stop and process something and think about things. So it's not like, I don't want to keep going with this, I just need to catch my breath. And those can be used quite effectively, and it gives you some background together with like discussing the themes up front with your players. A little bit of safety there for you and for your players as well too. So those things, in terms of nasty things which have happened and bringing up people's backgrounds, have happened in the past, and they will certainly happen in the future. So be prepared for that. Number 3, be adaptable. Now, this may sound completely obvious to most people, but you'll have, and you may put a lot of work into your scenarios. I tend to, and almost always something will change. They may go slower. You may want to move them on. You might want to skip encounters if you can. You might want to change the encounters so it sort of draws them in. Go for it. That's what you've got to do. It's about selling the story, getting the pacing right, getting your characters involved, and having some fun. So one other thing is really players will do things which are unexpected, and that's the joy of the game. Otherwise, you'd sort of play a much more rigorous online computer game, online role playing game, where you have constraints which kind of stop you from doing that. In real life tabletop, players can do anything, and often will. So, and that will go off in a tangent, and maybe that tangent can explore something else. You can be creative about that. Um, and other times it'll just be, I have no idea what to do. So it's okay for you to take a moment and go, well, I need to think about where you're going and what you're doing. Um, the other is be adaptable about the timing and descriptions of scenarios. Like I tend to write down a lot of prose about the descriptions about what characters can see leading into an encounter and those sorts of things. But sometimes it can be overdone. Sometimes you can go into too much detail depending on what your characters are doing and how the play is going. So just be adaptable and understand the sort of timing of those sorts of things. One of the great things about that is, like, for example, if you sort of build up a crescendo during your session and you sort of get to, what euphemistically might be called the boss battle, um, you really want to actually get the players really involved with that. So sort of at the end of each turn, you might go, okay, so this is the situation. You've got there, you're holding on to Grim Life whilst grabbing onto another character there. That doesn't leave you any option to actually pull out a sword or a crossbow or something. And get the characters involved. Try to give them some timing. Like if there's something which is going to be potentially deadly, you could sit there and say, if you don't do something with this, end of next turn, they'll be sucked into this vortex and go who knows where. So always think about that as you sort of go through, which kind of leads us on to the next tip: cooperative play. What do I mean by that? I mean, as a GM, and it depends whether or not you're sort of into a more combat-oriented gaming space or you're more storytelling. Um, don't play against your players. Play with your players, and that's the same even if you have got a combat-heavy type of scenario. Engage with your players and and celebrate their wins too. So you go through a large combat, help them flesh out how that combat works and how they've done stuff. If they've got a critical roll or a critical fumble, describe it out. Not just go, hey, crit hit, do whatever, or crit fumble, he drops his sword. Be a bit more descriptive about that, or even ask the players, how do they want that scene to play out? So engage with them and make it cooperative, and that also helps in terms of fleshing out your world as well too, where you certainly won't have everything written down or everything catered for. And if you develop that sort of environment, your players really help you write out that story as things go. Now, lastly, talking about stories, overdevelopment is a key one, and I think this happens a lot when you first start writing a lot of your own stuff. You tend to sort of get involved either in sort of world building, scenario building, everything else, and you go to the most minute detail, capture this and do that. Often I've found that is counterproductive. And why do I say it's counterproductive? Because sometimes you get so caught up in that you can miss the pacing and miss the enjoyment side of things as you do that. The other is that if you do that, as you're going through the flow of an encounter, you feel the need to sometimes get back into that detail, and then you have to sort of refer to a lot of notes and go, hang on, I know what's going to happen here, just give me a second, rather than going what feels right and ad-libbing through it. So all of those things are quite important. So hopefully those 5 tips have helped. A sort of a little bit of a combination of prep and running a session, but we'll cover off a lot of other things as we move forward. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the tips. Hope they've helped. And just remember, the prime directive is have fun. So have fun, and we'll see you soon.